My internet was slow for 6 months. 6 months of buffering, 6 months of dropped calls, 6 months of watching that little spinning circle mock me while I tried to do my job. Then I found out why. My neighbor was stealing my Wi-Fi, and not just using it for himself. He was selling access to half the neighborhood, running a business off my connection, charging people $20 a month for internet that I was paying for. And when I finally confronted him, when I finally called him out on what he was doing, he laughed in my face, told me to prove it. So I did, and it cost him everything. Let me tell you something about myself. I am not a confrontational person. I have spent 39 years on this planet avoiding conflict like it was my full-time job. I work in IT. I troubleshoot problems for a living. I fix things. I find solutions. I do not yell at people. I do not threaten people. I go to work. I come home. I pet my cat, and I enjoy my quiet evenings with a book or a documentary about ancient civilizations. That is who I am. That is who I have always been. But there is something about being pushed too far that changes a person. There is something about being disrespected and dismissed and treated like a fool that wakes up a part of you that you did not even know existed. Shane woke up that part of me, and by the time I was done with him, he wished he had never touched my network. If you have ever dealt with a neighbor who thought they could walk all over you, if you have ever been taken advantage of by someone who mistook your kindness for weakness, then you know exactly what I am about to describe. You know that slow burn of frustration that builds and builds until it becomes something else entirely, something focused, something patient, something dangerous. I want you to stick around for this one because this story has everything: betrayal, technical warfare, legal consequences, and the kind of poetic justice that only happens when the universe decides to balance the scales. If you enjoy stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this ends. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Let me tell you about the house on Maple Ridge Drive and the neighbor who thought he was smarter than everyone else. Let me tell you about the 6 months of hell that led to the most satisfying revenge of my entire life. I bought my house in April of 2021, a modest 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb about 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was not a fancy neighborhood, but it was nice. Well-maintained lawns, mature trees lining the streets, the kind of place where people wave at each other when they are getting their mail, but mostly keep to themselves. That was exactly what I wanted. After years of apartment living, of hearing my upstairs neighbors at all hours, of sharing walls with people who seemed physically incapable of keeping their television at a reasonable volume, I craved peace. I craved silence. I craved a space that was entirely my own. The house needed some work. The kitchen was dated, and the bathrooms had not been updated since the 90s, but the bones were good. The roof was new, the foundation was solid, and the backyard was big enough for a garden, which was something I had always wanted but never had room for. I put in an offer the day after my first showing, and 6 weeks later, I was carrying boxes through the front door and wondering how I was going to fill all this space.
The first few months were everything I had hoped for. I set up my home office in the spare bedroom upstairs. I had a great view of the backyard from my desk, and I could watch the birds at the feeder I had hung from the old oak tree. I planted tomatoes and peppers and basil in raised beds I built myself. I adopted a gray tabby cat from the local shelter and named him Router, which I thought was hilarious because of my job. My friends thought it was the most IT thing I had ever done. They were probably right. Work was well. I had been with the same company for 7 years, a mid-sized software firm that had gone fully remote during the pandemic and never looked back. I was a network administrator, which meant I spent my days making sure other people could do their jobs without their computers catching fire. It was not glamorous work, but I was good at it, and the flexibility of working from home meant I could structure my days exactly how I wanted. Morning coffee on the back porch, a midday walk around the neighborhood, dinner whenever I felt like cooking. It was the life I had always imagined for myself. The only thing I needed to make it all work was reliable internet. And I mean reliable. When your job involves remote access to servers, video calls with clients, and uploading massive files to cloud storage, you cannot afford to have your connection drop. You cannot afford buffering. You cannot afford lag. So when I moved in, the very first thing I did was call the local fiber provider and sign up for their top-tier plan. Gigabit fiber, symmetrical upload and download speeds, the kind of connection that makes other people jealous when you mention it at parties. Not that I mentioned it at parties. I did not really go to parties. The technician came out and ran the fiber line directly to my office. I bought a top-of-the-line router with enterprise-grade features. I set up a secure network with a strong password and enabled all the security protocols. I was meticulous about it because that is who I am. That is what I do. When the setup was complete, I ran a speed test and nearly cried with joy. 940 megabits per second download, 938 upload. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything I needed. For about 3 months. Then things started to change. At first, it was subtle. A video call would freeze for a second or two. A file upload would take slightly longer than expected. I noticed it, but I did not think much of it. Every network has hiccups. Every connection has moments of congestion. I ran a few diagnostics, did not find anything obviously wrong, and moved on with my life. But the problems did not go away. They got worse. By September, I was dealing with lag during every video call. My screen would freeze, the audio would cut out. I would be in the middle of explaining a technical issue to a client, and suddenly I would be staring at a frozen image of my own face while my coworker asked if I was still there. It was embarrassing, it was frustrating, and it was starting to affect my work. I called my internet provider. They ran remote diagnostics and told me everything looked fine on their end. The signal was strong, the connection was stable. Must be something on my side. So I reset my router, I updated the firmware, I moved the router to a different location, I even ran new Ethernet cables to my office to eliminate any potential wireless issues.
Nothing helped. Has anyone else dealt with technology problems that just seem to defy explanation? Where you have done everything right and things still do not work the way they should? Let me know in the comments because I was losing my mind. I called the provider again in October and again in November. Each time they told me the same thing. The connection is fine, must be your equipment. Finally, in December, after my connection dropped during a critical presentation to a client in Chicago, I decided enough was enough. I went out and bought a brand new router, top of the line, $350. The kind of router that promises to eliminate dead zones and handle dozens of devices simultaneously without breaking a sweat. I spent an entire Saturday setting it up, configuring every setting, optimizing every parameter. It did not help. If anything, things got worse. That was when I decided to do what I should have done from the beginning. I decided to actually look at what was happening on my network. I logged into the router's admin panel and navigated to the connected devices section. And that is when my stomach dropped. 12 devices. 12 devices connected to my network. I lived alone. I had 3 devices. My work laptop, my personal phone, and my tablet that I used for reading. 3 devices. That was it. So where were the other 9 coming from? I stared at the screen for a long time. My first thought was that someone had hacked me remotely. Some cyber criminal in Eastern Europe or wherever had compromised my network and was using it for who knows what. But that did not make sense. My security was solid. My password was strong. There was no way someone from the outside had gotten in. Then I started looking at the device names. Most of them were generic: iPhone, Samsung Galaxy, laptop, the kind of default names that don't tell you much. But one of them caught my eye. Shane iPhone. Shane? That was my neighbor, Shane Holloway. He lived in the house directly to my left, a ranch-style place with overgrown hedges and a truck that was always parked in the driveway. I had met him exactly twice since moving in. Once when he knocked on my door to ask if I had seen his dog, a yappy little terrier that liked to escape the backyard, and once when he waved at me from his porch while I was getting my mail. Both interactions had been brief and unremarkable. He seemed like a regular guy, maybe a little rough around the edges, but nothing that set off any alarms. But now his phone was on my network. His phone was using my internet, the internet I was paying $120 a month for. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to process what I was seeing.
Part of me wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe our devices had somehow gotten confused. Maybe there was some kind of technical glitch that was making his phone appear on my network when it was really connected to his own. But I knew better. I work in IT. I know how networks function. There is no glitch that would cause this. Someone had connected to my Wi-Fi on purpose. And since Shane iPhone was sitting right there on the list, it was pretty obvious who that someone was. The question was how. My password was not simple. It was not my birthday or my address or the word password spelled backward. It was a randomized string of letters and numbers that I had generated specifically to be difficult to guess.
So how had he gotten in? I decided to find out. But first, I needed to confront him. It was a Saturday afternoon in mid-December. Cold and gray, the kind of Ohio winter day where the sky looks like a dirty ceiling and you can smell snow coming. I put on my coat and walked next door, my breath forming little clouds in the air. Shane's truck was in the driveway, so I knew he was home. I knocked on the door and waited. He answered after about a minute, wearing a stained Ohio State sweatshirt and looking like he had just woken up, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. He squinted at me for a second, clearly trying to remember who I was. "Hey, man," he said, "what's up?" I kept my voice calm, friendly even. I told him I had noticed something strange with my internet and wanted to ask him about it. I told him I had seen a device called Shane iPhone connected to my network and wanted to know if he knew anything about that. He did not even try to deny it. He did not look embarrassed or apologetic. He actually smiled, this crooked little smile that made my blood pressure spike about 20 points. "Oh yeah," he said, "I've been using your Wi-Fi for a few months. Your password was super easy to guess, man. You should really thank me for pointing out that security flaw." I stood there on his porch, blinking at him, trying to understand what I was hearing. He was proud of himself. He was genuinely proud of himself for hacking into my network and stealing my internet. I asked him what he meant by easy to guess. I had used a complex password. There was no way he had just figured it out. He shrugged. "There are tools for that," he said. "Programs that crack Wi-Fi passwords. I found one online. Took maybe a day to get through yours, but it worked." I could feel my hands starting to shake, not from the code, from the effort of keeping my voice level. I asked him how long he had been doing this. Since September, maybe? He said it like it was nothing, like he was telling me about a show he had been watching. I told him he needed to stop. I told him that was theft. I told him I was paying for that internet, and he had no right to use it. He held up his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, dude. Just change your password. No big deal. I'll find another way to get online." I walked back to my house without saying another word. I was too angry to trust myself to speak. I went straight to my computer, logged into my router, and changed the password. This time, I used 20 characters, upper and lowercase letters, numbers, symbols, the kind of password that would take a cracking tool years to break. I also enabled MAC address filtering, which meant only devices I specifically approved could connect, even if they had the password. I enabled WPA3 encryption. I did everything I could think of to lock down my network. For 2 days, everything was perfect. My speeds were back to normal. Video calls worked flawlessly. Files uploaded in seconds. I started to relax. I started to think the problem was solved. Then, on Tuesday evening, my connection dropped in the middle of a support call with my boss. I logged into my router as soon as I hung up. 12 devices connected. He had done it again. Somehow, despite everything, Shane had cracked my new password and gotten back onto my network. And he had brought his friends. If that makes you mad just hearing about it, imagine how I felt living it. If you are feeling that frustration right now, let me know with a like, because this is only the beginning. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running scenarios through my head, trying to figure out how he had done it. A 20-character password with full complexity should have taken months to crack, even with professional tools. But he had done it in 2 days. That meant he was either using much more sophisticated software than I had given him credit for, or there was something else going on.
The next morning, I started doing research. I went deep into forums and technical articles about Wi-Fi security vulnerabilities. I learned about WPS attacks, which exploit a feature in many routers that allows for easy setup but creates a security hole. I checked my router. WPS was disabled. I learned about deauthentication attacks, where a hacker forces your devices to disconnect and then captures the authentication handshake when they reconnect. That was possible, but it would still require cracking the password afterward. Then I found something that made my heart sink. There was a vulnerability in the specific router model I was using, a flaw in the firmware that allowed someone with the right tools to bypass certain security measures. The manufacturer had released a patch 2 months ago, but the patch had not installed automatically on my device. I had been running outdated firmware this entire time. I updated immediately, but I knew that might not be enough. If Shane had already gotten in once using the vulnerability, he might have left himself a back door. So I did a full factory reset of the router. I wiped everything and started from scratch. New password, new network name, new everything. 3 days later, 12 devices on my network. Again. That was when I realized this was not going to stop. Shane had found a way in, and he was not going to give it up. He had probably set up some kind of automated script that would crack any new password I set. He was committed to this. What would you have done in my situation? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments because I was at a complete loss. I considered my options. I could keep changing passwords and hope he eventually got tired, but that clearly was not working. I could confront him again, but he had already shown he did not care. I could call the police, but what would I even tell them? My neighbor is using my Wi-Fi? That felt like such a minor thing. Would they even take it seriously? I decided to gather more information before making any decisions. I needed to understand exactly what Shane was doing and how extensive the problem was. I started monitoring my network more carefully. I logged every device that connected, noting the times and the data usage. What I found was disturbing. Those 12 devices were not all Shane's. Some of them belonged to different households entirely. I could tell because of the device names. There was one called Johnson Family iPad, another called Maria's laptop, a third called Game Room PS5. Shane was not just stealing my internet for himself, he was sharing it with others. But why would he do that? Out of the kindness of his heart? That did not fit with what I knew about him. So I started paying closer attention to the neighborhood. I started watching. And one evening, about a week before Christmas, I got my answer.
I was taking out the trash when I saw Shane talking to a woman I recognized from a few houses down. I could not hear everything they said, but I caught enough. She handed him some cash, he nodded and said something about the password, then she walked away. He was charging them. Shane was charging people for access to my internet. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. This guy had not just stolen from me, he had built an entire business around stealing from me. He was probably making hundreds of dollars a month off my connection while I sat there paying the bill and wondering why my speeds were so bad. That night, I sat in my office for a long time, Router the cat curled up on the chair beside me, and I thought about what to do. The reasonable part of me said to just call the police and report it, let the authorities handle it. But another part of me, a part that had been growing stronger over the past few weeks, wanted something more. I wanted Shane to understand exactly how badly he had miscalculated. I wanted him to feel consequences, real consequences. And then I started to form a plan. See, here is the thing about working in IT for almost 20 years. You learn a lot about networks. You learn how they work, how they break, and how they can be used in ways that most people never think about. You also learn about something called a honeypot. A honeypot is a trap. It is a fake system or network that looks legitimate but is actually designed to attract attackers and monitor their behavior. Companies use them all the time to study hackers and gather information about their methods. But there is no reason an individual cannot set one up too. No reason at all. I spent the week between Christmas and New Year putting my plan together.
I bought a second router and configured it as a completely separate access point. I gave it a name that I knew would be irresistible to Shane and his customers: free_fast_internet. No password, no security, just a wide open network begging to be used. But this network did not actually connect to the internet. Instead, it connected to a small server I had set up in my basement. Every device that connected would be logged automatically. MAC addresses, device names, connection times, duration, everything. And anyone who tried to browse the web would be redirected to a single page, a page I had created myself. The page was simple: black background, white text. It read, "This network is monitored. All activity is being logged. Unauthorized access to computer networks is a federal crime under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. By connecting to this network, you acknowledge that your device information has been recorded and may be provided to law enforcement." I did not expect this page to stop anyone. Shane and his customers were not the type to read fine print or worry about legal warnings, but that was okay. The page was not really for them. It was for documentation. It was proof that I had warned them, proof that they could not claim ignorance. I also secured my main network with every protection available. I upgraded to a business class plan with my ISP, which came with additional security features and a static IP address. I implemented certificate-based authentication, which meant that even if someone cracked the password, they still could not connect without a specific digital certificate that only my devices had.
I set up network intrusion detection that would alert me immediately if anyone tried anything suspicious. Shane was not getting back in, not this time. I activated the honeypot on January 2nd. It took less than 24 hours for the first device to connect. Shane iPhone, of course. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my logs fill up with data. 12 devices connected in the first day. By the end of the first week, there were 18. By the second week, 23. Shane had been telling people about the new free network. He had been expanding his customer base, and every single one of them was being logged. I also did some old-fashioned detective work during this time. I talked to neighbors. Not about the Wi-Fi specifically, just casual conversations. Hey, how is it going? Nice weather we are having, that kind of thing. And I steered the conversations toward Shane when I could. What I learned was eye-opening. Shane had been offering cheap internet to people in the neighborhood for almost a year. He told people he had a special deal with a provider, some kind of business account that he could share. He charged $20 a month, which was about half of what most people were paying for their own connections. For a lot of people, especially those on tight budgets, it seemed like a great deal. Of course, it was not his internet to share. It was mine. And before me, it had apparently been someone else's. The previous owners of my house, from what I pieced together, had also had problems with slow internet. They had just never figured out why. I talked to a woman named Patricia who lived 3 houses down. She was in her 60s, retired, and had been using Shane's network for about 8 months. She paid him in cash every month. She had no idea she was doing anything wrong. She thought Shane was just being a good neighbor. I talked to a young couple named the Garcias who had just moved into the neighborhood a few months before me. They were using Shane's internet because they were trying to save money for a down payment on a bigger house. They had a baby on the way, and every dollar counted. I talked to a guy named Marcus who worked from home like I did. He had been having the same problems I had: slow speeds, dropped connections. He had actually complained to Shane about it, not knowing that Shane was the cause. The more I learned, the angrier I got. Shane was not just stealing from me. He was deceiving people. He was taking advantage of neighbors who trusted him. And he was doing it all while I was paying the bill and suffering the consequences. By the end of January, I had everything I needed. 23 devices logged with full MAC addresses, device names, and connection histories. I had documented the times and dates of every connection. I had testimony from neighbors about the money they had paid Shane. I had evidence of a scheme that was not just theft of services, but potentially wire fraud. To everyone dealing with difficult neighbors right now, you are not alone.
Sometimes it feels like these situations will never end. But trust me, if you document everything and stay patient, there is usually a way to get justice. Keep watching because that is exactly what happened to me. I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not a big fancy firm, just a local attorney named David Chen who specialized in civil disputes and property issues.
I had found him through a recommendation from a coworker. He charged $150 for a consultation, which felt like a lot at the time, but ended up being worth every penny. I sat in his office on a gray Tuesday morning in early February and laid out everything. The timeline of my internet problems, the discovery of Shane on my network, the confrontation where Shane admitted to cracking my password, the evidence of him charging neighbors for access, the honeypot logs, all of it. David listened without interrupting. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You have got him," he said. "This is not even close. What your neighbor has been doing is illegal on multiple levels. Unauthorized access to a computer network is a crime under Ohio law and federal law. Charging people for services he does not own is fraud. You have documentation of everything. This is about as clear-cut as these things get." He laid out my options. I could go to the police and file a criminal complaint. They would probably investigate, though criminal cases can take a long time and the outcome is not always satisfying. Or I could pursue a civil case, suing Shane for damages and recovery of costs. Or I could do both. But first, he recommended something simpler, a cease and desist letter. Put everything in writing. Demand that Shane stop immediately. Demand payment for the bandwidth he had stolen. Make it clear that if he did not comply, I would pursue every legal option available. I liked that idea. It felt clean, professional, and it would create a paper trail that would be useful if things escalated. David drafted the letter that week. It was beautiful in its specificity. It listed the dates of unauthorized access. It cited the relevant laws. It included copies of my logs as exhibits. It demanded that Shane immediately cease all unauthorized access to my network and any networks connected to it. It demanded payment of $4,800, representing 6 months of service at commercial bandwidth rates, since Shane had been using my connection for commercial purposes by reselling it. And it warned that failure to comply would result in civil litigation and criminal referral. We sent it by certified mail with return receipt requested. Shane signed for it on February 12th. I also called my ISP that week. I explained the situation in detail. I told them I had evidence that a neighbor had been stealing my bandwidth and reselling it to others. I sent them copies of my documentation, and I asked what they intended to do about it. They took it seriously, much more seriously than I expected. It turns out that internet providers really do not like it when people steal their service and then profit from it. The representative I spoke with told me they would be opening an investigation, they would be reviewing usage patterns, and they would be taking action. The waiting was the hardest part. I had done everything I could. The honeypot was still running, still logging devices. The cease and desist had been sent. The ISP was investigating. All I could do was wait and see what happened. For about a week, nothing changed. Devices kept connecting to the honeypot. Shane kept going about his business. I wondered if he was just going to ignore the letter entirely. Then, on February 19th, I got a knock on my door. It was Shane. He looked different than before.
Nervous, agitated, none of that cocky confidence from our first confrontation. "Look, man," he said before I could even say hello, "can we talk about this letter? I think there has been a misunderstanding." I told him there was no misunderstanding. I told him I had documentation of everything. I told him he had been stealing from me for 6 months, and I intended to be compensated. He started making excuses. He said he did not realize it was such a big deal. He said he was just trying to help out neighbors who couldn't afford their own internet. He said he would stop if I just dropped the whole thing. I asked him about the money, the thousands of dollars he had collected from people from my bandwidth. Was he going to refund that too? He did not have an answer for that. He just stood there on my porch, shifting from foot to foot, looking like a kid who had been caught cheating on a test. Too late, I told him. I have already contacted the authorities. What happens next is out of my hands. He tried to argue. He tried to appeal to my sense of neighborly goodwill. He even tried to threaten me, saying that if I pursued this, he would make my life difficult. He would tell everyone in the neighborhood I was the bad guy. He would make sure no one wanted anything to do with me. I closed the door in his face. If you think I did the right thing, let me know what the like. Because honestly, standing there watching him squirm was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. The next few weeks were eventful. The ISP completed their investigation and determined that my account had been used to serve significantly more bandwidth than a residential connection should. They calculated the excess usage and determined that at commercial rates, Shane owed them just over $8,000. They sent him a bill. He ignored it, so they sent another one. Then they sent a notice that they would be pursuing legal action if he did not pay. Shane called me in early March, furious. He screamed at me over the phone, told me I was ruining his life, told me I was a vindictive piece of garbage who could not just let things go. He said he was going to sue me. He said he was going to make sure I regretted this. I recorded the call. Ohio is a one-party consent state, which means I did not need his permission to record. I saved the recording and added it to my documentation. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed a civil complaint on my behalf. We were suing Shane for the $4,800 demanded in the cease and desist, plus attorney fees, plus punitive damages for fraud. And I made a police report. I walked into the local precinct with a folder full of documentation and explained the entire situation to a detective named Ramirez. He listened, took notes, and said he would look into it. I did not expect much from that angle, but I wanted it on record. If you are enjoying this story, if you want to hear how it ends, hit that subscribe button. There is still more to come, and you do not want to miss it. The ISP moved faster than I expected. By mid-March, they had filed suit against Shane for the unpaid bill, $8,000 plus legal fees plus interest. They were not messing around. Shane hired a lawyer, a cut-rate attorney he found online somewhere. The guy sent my lawyer a letter saying that Shane disputed the charges and intended to fight the lawsuit. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documentation I had provided, combined with the ISP's own records, painted a clear picture of what had happened. Shane's customers started finding out what was going on. Patricia, the retired woman, called me one afternoon in tears. She had received a letter from the ISP warning her that she had been using an unauthorized connection and that any future use could result in legal action against her as well. She had no idea. She felt terrible. She apologized profusely. I did not blame her. I blamed Shane. She was as much a victim as I was. The Garcias were upset too. They were worried about getting in trouble when they had a baby on the way. I assured them that the ISP was going after Shane, not them. They were just people who had been deceived. Word spread through the neighborhood. People started looking at Shane differently. The friendly, helpful neighbor who had been offering cheap internet was actually a thief who had been profiting off someone else's service. His reputation crumbled. I saw him at the mailbox one afternoon in late March. He did not look at me. He grabbed his mail and hurried back inside like he could not get away fast enough. The civil cases dragged on through April. Shane's lawyer tried to negotiate. He offered to settle for half the amount demanded. The ISP rejected that offer. So did my lawyer. We wanted the full amount. We wanted Shane to feel the consequences of what he had done. Finally, in early May, Shane caved. His lawyer contacted us and said they were ready to settle. Shane agreed to pay the ISP $6,000, a slight reduction from the original $8,000, but still substantial. He agreed to pay me $3,800, covering my bandwidth costs plus part of my legal fees. And he signed an agreement admitting that he had accessed my network without permission and used my bandwidth for commercial purposes. Got your own nightmare neighbor story? Share it in the comments because I know I am not the only one who has dealt with someone like Shane. The money arrived in June, a cashier's check for $3,800. I deposited it with a sense of satisfaction that I cannot fully describe. It was not about the money, really. It was about being believed. It was about seeing consequences. It was about watching someone who thought they could get away with anything discover that they could not. Shane's troubles did not end with the settlement. The detective I had spoken to actually did follow up. Shane received a visit from the police. They did not arrest him, but they made it clear that what he had done was criminal and that any future incidents would be prosecuted. He was scared straight, at least when it came to my network. His financial situation deteriorated. The combined settlements totaled nearly $10,000 when you added up everything, including legal fees. That is not pocket change for anyone, and from what I gathered, Shane was not exactly flush with cash to begin with. His truck disappeared from the driveway in July, probably sold to cover deaths. By August, there was a for sale sign in front of his house. I watched the moving trucks come in September. Shane loaded up his belongings and drove away without so much of a glance in my direction. Good riddance. Where are you watching from? Let me know what state you're in, because I am curious how many of you have dealt with neighbors like this.
It seems like these stories are more common than anyone wants to admit. The new neighbors who moved into Shane's old house are lovely. A couple in their 50s with a golden retriever named Biscuit who comes to visit Rooter through our shared fence. They are quiet, respectful, and they pay for their own internet. Funny how that works. My connection has been perfect ever since the honeypot went up. Lightning fast, completely reliable. I upgraded to a business class plan with enterprise security, and I have not had a single unauthorized device on my network. Not one. Looking back, I learned a few important lessons from this whole experience. First, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I knew for months that something was off with my internet, but I kept accepting the explanations that nothing was wrong on the provider's end. I should have dug deeper sooner. Second, document everything. If I had not kept meticulous records, if I had not set up the honeypot and logged every connection, I would not have had the evidence I needed to prove what was happening. Documentation is power. Third, there are legal remedies for almost everything, but you have to pursue them. I could have just changed my password repeatedly and let Shane keep hacking in. I could have accepted that this was just how things were. Instead, I decided to fight back through proper channels. It took time, it cost money, but it worked. And finally, being the quiet, introverted guy does not mean you have to be a pushover. I spent most of my life avoiding conflict. I still do not enjoy it. But when someone pushes you far enough, when they take advantage of your good nature and laugh in your face about it, you have every right to push back. You have every right to defend yourself. And sometimes, the quiet ones who know how systems work are the most dangerous people to cross. My life is good now. Better than before, actually. I still work from home. I still enjoy my quiet evenings with Rooter the cat. I still tend my garden in the summer and read books about ancient civilizations. But I do it all with a sense of peace that I did not have before. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that you stood up for yourself and won. Shane, wherever you are, I hope you learned your lesson. I hope you think twice before you try to steal from someone again. Because the next person might not be as patient as I was. The next person might not give you 6 months to dig your own grave before they start filling it in. To everyone who stuck around for this whole story, thank you. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. And if you have your own story about a neighbor who got exactly what they deserved, I want to hear it. Share it in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and remember to check who is connected to your network. You never know who might be lurking.